GM fam, today is Friday, July 12th, 2024, the first day of the rest of all of our lives, and I sincerely hope it's your best one yet. We're a little bit late getting off the ground today, but it's for very good reason. Let me flash back briefly. Occasionally, I've told some people that I have been in crypto since about 2014, almost 10 years ago. And one of the reasons that I got into crypto, my superhero origin story, you might say, is that I was in one of those rooms where I was the dumbest person in the room, which is exactly the room you want to be in. And when you notice it, you're like, okay, I found the right place. And one of the people who was in this room, and in fact, convinced me that Bitcoin was amazing and awesome and useful, is joining us today. He's the founder of Thesis, Thesis asterisk. I don't know what the asterisk is pointing to in it, but we'll be able to get into that and plenty more. Matt Luongo, welcome.
Hey, Garrett. Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you again, man.
So it's been a decade maybe since we spoke. What have you been up to?
Yeah, let's see. So when we first met, we were working on Bitcoin payments. When you're measuring in years, not too long after that, we decided Bitcoin is not for payments. You should never spend your Bitcoin, right? So we took that company, which is Fold. We kind of got it focused on rewards rather than payments. We spun it out. Since then, we turned the parent company into what is today Thesis. So we are a venture builder in the crypto space. We're really focused on making Bitcoin useful. So we do a lot of stuff on Ethereum. We do stuff on Solana, but it's really about Bitcoin, the asset, first. And since then, we've launched TBTC, which is, I think, the only decentralized Bitcoin bridge left standing. And that's done pretty well. And then we recently announced Acre, which is a Bitcoin yield product that's getting ready to go to mainnet, and Mezzo, which is in this new batch of Bitcoin L2s, it's a sidechain. This whole L2 thing in Bitcoin's not quite ready for. But yeah, so we've had a number of opportunities to do some really cool stuff with Curve, and really all across DeFi.
Yeah. Now I have to admit, you got me on the Bitcoin bandwagon, and I'm still most of my crypto holdings are in Bitcoin, but I did sort of hop off and become more of an Ethereum person. Nothing against Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoin was so boring.
It's hard not to. Of course, yeah.
2017 to 2019 in particular, it was you look on Twitter and it was just ETH maxis debating Bitcoin maxis, and I didn't care because I kind of liked both. I didn't have much Ethereum, but I was whatever.
Yeah.
They're both pretty awesome. And I'm not into this fighting about which is marginally better. Bitcoin ended up being better price wise, as it turns out. I think though, from my perspective, the Ethereum technology has just always been super interesting. But it sounds like Bitcoin is catching up a little bit in terms of they're starting to kind of discover all the civilizational advances that Ethereum's been using and perfecting through all of our blood, sweat, and losses, mind you. We're we lose.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So on the one hand, Papa Bitcoin was first, and since at least we both got in the space 2014, but I remember seeing posts from 2011, 2012 where people would say, everything that gets launched off Bitcoin will come back. And so I think what we're going to find out is, I think that's true. I think that's obviously true. What we're going to find out is whether or not we came back fast enough. I think that, you mentioned 2017 and 2019, and aside from that, there was a bit of a bear market during the last half of that. It was kind of a dark time, right? Because as a technology, we said, okay, Bitcoin is for savings. And look, I was a big blocker, so I was not a fan of this initially. But then, and so we're doing some throwback Bitcoin history. But at the time, there was this idea of this New York agreement. And then there was also a China agreement where we had all of these folks come together and say hey, we want to change Bitcoin. And what was interesting about that is it was the first time that I wasn't in the room. So obviously I don't mean I'm so important. Obviously I wasn't, but I just mean most of the time when there had been these big governance discussions, I was like, oh, I heard about it and I got involved. And this time I didn't. I wasn't in New York. I wasn't in Hong Kong. I wasn't there. And so even though they were pushing for big blocks, it was kind of this object lesson to me, like, hey, do you want Bitcoin to be governed by companies in space? Is that right? And, a lot of these lessons, it sounds old, but a lot of these lessons really haven't been learned even in Ethereum, and certainly not in these other chains, fully, which was, what ultimately broke this thing, this SegWit2x like compromise, was the threat of a user-activated soft fork, which for folks who aren't into this, that's basically node operators saying they would refuse to recognize the new chain after SegWit2x. And the other thing that happened is that it just wasn't a very well organized fork, right? So actually, it turned out if we had all done SegWit2x, it would have halted the chain, which would have been a pretty big deal. So all of these kind of big governance issues, it led to a lot of people exiting Bitcoin. And so, it's like my asset allegiance didn't change, but I did the same thing. I'm an engineer. And if you won't give me room to build applications, of course you're going to go to something like Ethereum or something like Solana. So no, I think that's, I'm not, even though I have an asset allegiance, I think it's super normal. Anyone who wants to build something new is going to go where they can.
Yeah. So before the show, we were talking a bit about your experience in buying a house using Bitcoin, and it was an amazing story. Like, I don't know, like how much of it you want to like recap for everyone, but like, can you talk a bit about your experience with the caveat that like bad things in the Curve universe, especially happen to people who buy houses. So
of course,
downplayed big house.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear: reasonable small houses, not multiples of market cap houses. So I live a modest life, but yeah, I back in like, I want to say maybe 2019, we moved from the West Coast. We moved to be closer to grandparents. We had our second kid coming, and we were like, we don't want to kind of live out in California. It's quite an experience living in the Bay Area with kids, and with two, it was a little too much. So like, okay, let's escape all this and go somewhere where we have some more help. And so I thought, okay, well, I have this Bitcoin, and I want to buy a house, and I don't want to sell the Bitcoin. And so what if I get a loan against it? And that just kind of made sense, right? Bitcoin is collateral. We don't use it for payments. Well, don't spend it on a house. Get a loan. And so I went to do that, and I got laughed at by a bunch of lenders. And then but then I finally got a hot tip. There was a crypto-friendly lender that I should talk to. So I did. And so I walked in, and it was like a physical location, which was weird enough. But I walked in, and I said, hey, I have some Bitcoin, and it's worth this much, and clearly I'm good for this, and I would expect good rates because you're not taking a lot of risk, right? You're taking FX risk, but I'm actually giving you all this extra collateral in addition to the house that is already collateralizing the mortgage. And for those of you, especially if you're not familiar with the U.S. system, right, because this is a very U.S. specific financial instrument, mortgage is a complicated thing. But the basic idea is that you're taking a loan against a piece of property. You put down a down payment, and it gives you leverage on the property, right? So you're not paying for the whole thing up front. You then pay off the loan. Typically in the U.S., it's a 30 or a 15-year term. So anyway, I do all this. I show up. I meet the lender. I get excited. They're crypto friendly. They have a good little talk with me, and they say, yeah, so I heard you had crypto. Yeah. And I said, okay, sell it, come back in 31 days, and we won't talk about it again. And so I was just thinking to myself, 31 days, that's interesting. Is this fraud? What's happening? Like, are you asking me to like hide that the money came? What's even going on? What does this mean? Also, the whole point was I didn't want to trigger cap gains. I didn't want to dispose. I think that this is going to be worth more in 10 years and yada, yada. Definitely worth more than the house that I'm going to buy. Anyway, so it was disappointing, and thankfully, I have, I just went about it the normal way, and I figured out a way to get a house. It was fine. A few years later,
I'm guessing interest rates were like 0% also.
Yes, yeah. So it's like, actually, thanks for the free money. I would much rather get leverage with super low rates than I would like sacrifice my exposure to my Bitcoin. So fast forward, so we just bought another house. We moved, and so our financial situation is very different than 2019. I can pay cash if I want to pay cash. I can do all sorts of things. But I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool to check in and see what I can do with my Bitcoin today? And so, so I didn't like liquidate my stash or anything, but I thought, like, well, what if I could take out a loan? And so the caveat, though, was I had to go quickly. So we didn't expect to move. So I didn't have a lot of time to plan and move things around. And so I had to show cash very, very quickly. And so I was like, okay, well, I have some TBTC. I mean, it's in a doxed public wallet. And TBTC is a bridge that we've built at Thesis exactly for this purpose, right? So you can use your Bitcoin in DeFi, but you don't have to have a custodian like BitGo. And so we said, okay, I've got some TBTC. I'm going to take a Curve USD loan against it. And so here are the things that went very well. I got access to cash immediately. I didn't have to talk to anyone. I didn't have to explain it. And I was able to very quickly be like, hey, I'm going to buy a house and here's the cash. Like, it's very straightforward. Downsides. Those rates, everyone else who's doing something like this, they're doing it because they're trying to lever up or they're trying to, do whatever. So they're happy to pay much higher rates. I'm looking for something for a house for 30 years. So I can, like, my Bitcoin can keep appreciating. I don't want to pay 15%. I should be paying, I should have a ZERP experience. Even if mortgages rates have gone up, I shouldn't be paying a lot. And anyway, so, I mean, since then, actually, if you want to watch what's going on, you can look at one of my public wallets, did all this. Cool thing, we got the house. Bad thing, Bitcoin price dropped. I got liquidated. Good thing, Curve USD liquidations are quite a bit more forgiving than a lot of systems that I've used. And so, yeah, so I think a lot of my learnings have been over the years, we've made Bitcoin more useful. Not enough, right? All of that required me to understand Curve. It required me to have ETH as gas, which doesn't make sense if I'm doing something with my Bitcoin. It required me to have, a MetaMask and all of these different pieces of software. And really, all you want to do is you want to lock your Bitcoin, you want to get some USD, and you want the terms to be pretty reasonable. So, anyway, I do this every few years. I guess I just like to make huge purchases with crypto and then kind of check in and see what can we learn.
Yeah. So in a second, I want to get to kind of the product that you've designed around lending for Bitcoin from this. But first, I'm just curious about the mechanics of the Curve USD loan. Was this like, do you remember the number of bands that you set, like, and the liquidation process, like how many days you set in liquidation, all that? Like, I'm
So I can actually, so I actually haven't even checked. I know it got liquidated, but I have been literally moving for a week and a half. So I'm like,
okay.
When I saw the price movement, I was like, oh, that's going to get wrecked. And I was like, do I have time to defend it? No, I have to keep moving. So I just like let it happen, And so, no, but what I do know is that that I am basically, like, I did enough research going in that I just thought, if I get liquidated, it's okay. I checked my amounts and I felt good about it. But I think one of the takeaways that I had with Curve USD, I don't actually know if this is useful for the Curve ecosystem, but for me was, I was just like, if I'm gonna have like a long term, this isn't the right product yet, right? So like soft liquidations and all of this is really cool, and that's part of why I used it. But like it was weird that I'm looking to buy something that I want to hold and have my family live in for 30 years. And then the rates are going up and down. And so my thought was, well, I'm going to immediately refinance. And instead, of course, the liquidation. So that's a different way of refinancing. So I think that was interesting. Like, it seems like there's a hole where it's like, okay, well, if you want to buy something big and long, I mean, if someone wants to buy an office building, for example, just think like big stuff, not even just stuff in your personal life. I don't think we have there's a hole in the DeFi market for that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I don't think that. My guess is like, I can't read his mind. Mitch would probably agree with that as well, and that, like, you design financial products for a particular use case, or at any startup, you design a product for a use case, and the big use of borrowing within crypto has been leverage trading, right? Like,
of course.
So I think it's a fantastic product for the people who want to leverage trade.
Same.
But if you're just looking to, like you say, like, keep your family in a house for 30 years, it might not be the right product. Like, you might be interested in more like fixed rates. So can you talk?
But honestly, I was thrilled because it got me that bridge. It got me where I needed to get, and we got in the house, so it worked out.
For sure. So, could you talk a bit about the product that you did build, or are in the process of
Yes.
building? I forget
Yeah, of course.
exactly
Of course.
where it fits in the timeline here.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of products at this point, right? So,
It's true.
so Thesis has a wallet called Tahoe, which is a MetaMask competitor. We have TBTC, which we built with originally the backing network was Keep. That's now merged into Threshold with New Cipher. So, like, we've been around a long time. So, lots of brands to throw at you. But the things that are kind of more recent and a little bit more interesting. So, TBTC has survived, the death of RenBTC, the death of Sol BTC and FTX and Alameda and all this stuff. It's come out unscathed. It's in a good spot. And what it's doing now is the DAO is taking it to bring minting directly into dApps. So what I mean by that is, for example, in Arbitrum, you'll just be able to bridge BTC directly to Arbitrum. It just looks like sending Bitcoin anywhere else. There's a QR code. There's a Bitcoin address. You don't need to really learn anything magical. It also covers gas, so it does all of that. So that's one of our products, and it's already integrated with CurveUSD. If you're interested in that, you got it. And it's fairly liquid. It's not WBTC, but who is? And after TBTC, what we've started working on is another one called two. One is called Acre, and that's a yield product. So if you check out acre.fi, you'll see it looks like a sort of like elevated version of what a lot of us loved about 2020 and DeFi summer. It's if you could imagine something kind of like Yearn, but it's just for Bitcoin. You put in Bitcoin natively on L1. You can do it from your ledger, Xverse, Unisat. You can earn BIPs, and then you pull your Bitcoin out. It's all done on chain. Some of it's on Ethereum, some of it's on other Bitcoin L2s. So you can see that there's no rehypothecation. You can track your risk. But I think that I guess the idea behind this is that I think there are really only two things people want to do with their Bitcoin. It's not spend it. It's they want to get loans against it. Okay, some people want to buy houses. Some people want to lever up to the moon, or they want to earn yield. And I think one of the biggest things when you go from Bitcoin to ETH, so like obviously as a developer, it's way more. There's a lot wider universe you can do building on Ethereum today. But there's also just yield. There's a native asset that has yield, and that's something that Bitcoin lacks. And so I think I've seen over the years people have switched their treasuries just for that, just because they wanted to stake their ETH rather than hold Bitcoin. So I think Acre is about catching up and kind of closing that gap. Ultimately, Bitcoin doesn't print more Bitcoin for stakers, so there's not native yield. You have to LP, you have to stake in these new L2s to get returns. And then the other project that we're working on is an L2. And I say that very loosely. It's a sidechain. If someone tells you something is a Bitcoin L2, they're probably stretching the truth. It is a sidechain. But the idea with the sidechain is it's EVM that uses Bitcoin as gas, and it's called Meso. And so this one we've been a lot more secretive about because we're just sort of like in our corner building. But the master plan is honestly, it's pretty straightforward. We want what I'm calling Bitcoin-fi. We want a really easy experience for people who just came from the ETF, from people who only hold Bitcoin on Coinbase, people who really haven't gotten to the level of using CurveUSD, who really haven't gotten to that sort of like level of even understanding something like MetaMask. And then on the other end, we want to replay a lot of what we've seen on Ethereum and Solana on Bitcoin. So we're thinking SocialFi. We're thinking, kind of like orange flavored versions of some of the other stuff going on.
Yeah, and let me just go ahead and interject disclaimer here in that I don't always ape into the projects that I like look into and write about, but I did take about 1 BTC and deposit it into Meso, just mostly under the investing thesis that I really like investing in projects where I actually know the founder and like can guess at their address, so I can go show up at their door if they rug. So I think you're like maybe less likely to rug, and also like it's Bitcoin, right? Like my Bitcoin's doing nothing. Like I might as well just give it to you all and see. Like
yeah. How often do you get an opportunity to actually do something with your Bitcoin, right? I think
Exactly. That's how I found
Right?
Ethereum. Like that's how I
Yeah.
became an Ethereum person. Is I was like
Yes.
looking for yield on Bitcoin, so I had to
Yep.
go to this like fruity little place called Ethereum. And
No, exactly. And I think like, look, if you're obviously do your own research. Anyone listening to this, and do what's right for you. But if you look into Mezzo, what we've done is we've built half of the bridge as the chain's getting ready to launch. So we've used TBTC, which again it's been live since 2020 and hasn't had an incident. It's going strong, and we've made it so that you can deposit Bitcoin, and it'll just use TBTC to do the bridging, and then it locks it in a smart contract and Solidity and on the EVM. It's quite straightforward. So you can read it, you can see what's happening with the funds, and and the idea is that the longer people lock, the more points they get,
I'd
and
push, I'd
eventually they'll
push
be able
back
to
on it
validate. Oh,
slightly. I
please.
push back on the slightly. I tried to read the contract, which is more than 99% of people
Oh,
do. It's a proxy
yeah.
contract, so I
Oh no,
couldn't.
no, just hit the read as proxy.
You
Yeah,
can,
I can show you an Etherscan if you want. There's a read as proxy button. You can. I
but that
promise
just
you can
lets
see
you read
that.
the functions of it, right?
Wait. No, I'll actually bring it up.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, because no, I think this is like key and obviously outside of the scope of what most people are comfortable doing. But let's see here. What could go wrong? I'm looking up random things on Etherscan Live, right?
No, there's like a
Okay.
number of things that like Etherscan is great, right? But there's like a few random things that I think it can do or it should be able to do, and
Yeah.
it's not 100% intuitive. So I
Yep.
assume it can't do it because I can't. I've not been able to figure it out. And
No, no, it's difficult.
one of them is reading the source code of proxy contracts. The
Yes.
pointer.
Yeah.
I
So here,
believe it's
let
got to be
me.
possible.
So here's how I will.
Go ahead and
I'll
share your
actually, if I can
screen.
share, yeah. So I'm going to show you guys literally how I do this. So I'm like, okay, because this is how I would do diligence on another project that I'm not involved with. So I'm like, okay, so I found this Dune. Cool, right? So this is a Dune dashboard by Mezzo. This program is called Proof of HODL. So it's like, okay, well, if I really want to follow this through, let's actually click through and choose query. And then if you scroll, you can see, oh, this contract address is where this query is coming from. So let's go on Etherscan and let's look at this address. So here's the trick, and this is, I agree, this is way more
I think
difficult.
you need to switch tabs. It's still showing Dune.
Oh, whew, 1 second here. View tab. Interesting. What? I don't know if that's a clever behavior or the worst. Okay, here we go. Okay. So we have this contract. So you can see there's 118 million in tokens in here. So let's look at that first, right? Wrap BTC, TBTC, USDE, USDT, Threshold USD, USDC, and just a little bit of Curve USD in there, right? So we go to the contract page, and you can see that like contract is verified. It's an upgradable proxy. But if you start
Which is
scrolling
red
through,
flag number one, by the way. If I didn't know
oh
you,
yeah,
I
yeah,
might
yeah,
come beat you up if you stole my Bitcoin.
yeah. So the question of who can upgrade that proxy, let's look, right? So you start scrolling, you're like, okay, it's ownable, got it.
It's pretty
We don't
standard.
need
Yeah,
this. This
this
is
part.
all pretty boring stuff. Let's get to the good stuff. Context, storage slots. Okay. Oh my gosh, they really do make this hard as hell. You're right. Okay, so let's do two things. So first, okay, ABI for the implementation contract. So it is insane that it doesn't just have a link on the code there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you click through here, and I guess it's going to make me stop sharing. If you click through here, and then I'll share again, you can actually see the implementation code, right? So now you can see, okay,
There we go. There we go.
Right. So there's this thing called portal.sol. Okay, cool. You've got tokens, supported tokens. By the way, I've never done this live on a stream, so like this is fun and weird. Cool. There's a deposit, withdraw. There's this idea of locking. So let's keep scrolling and let's look at how the auth actually works, right? And what you'll see pretty quickly is that let me make this this bigger here. No, of course not. Again, Etherscan is great, but not. There we go. Okay. So what you can see here is that you can deposit and withdraw. Each deposit is non-fungible. To withdraw, you do in fact actually have to have a matching deposit. Got it. There's this idea of receive approval, which makes things easier to remove. Basically makes it easier to deposit for Bitcoin only people. So we're going to skip over that. So there's this idea of locking. So what locking does is when you deposit TBTC or WBTC, you can actually say how long do I want to lock it. That determines how many points you get in the system. It turns out that, a little bit of an aside from the code for a second, that's also how the chain works. So we took this idea from Curve of VE Curve, and we said, what if there were VE BTC for a whole chain? So that's what we're trying to approximate right now, right? Is we're giving people this opportunity to lock, and then as the chain launches, this is actually how they'll become validators. But anyway, so let's keep going. Okay, so there's an unlock time. Cool. Let's look at the upgrades. Ownable, two-step upgradable, so that's good. It's two-step. Man, this is such a pain in the ass.
Should use Viper.
Okay, we're not gonna. I have successfully Vipered once, and then I switched back to Solidity, even though I think Viper is a much, much, much better language. So
I'm curious, why did you switch back to Solidity? Most people haven't even bothered trying Viper.
Yeah, so the funny thing is I have a bunch of Python experience from like yonder years. And the reason that I switched back was kind of related to the compiler pack, right? Which was I as an engineer, I want to use the thing that's the best for me. As a business person, I want to use the thing that the most people will get hurt at the same time if there's an issue.
Makes sense.
Right. And so it's a security principle. So like on the one hand, Viper actually solved a lot of security problems that Solidity hadn't solved for many years. But then on the other, it's the whole like more eyes make for shallow bugs, which is only sometimes true. But anyway, if I had to choose a language to use the rest of my life and I didn't have to worry about compilers, I would probably have to choose Viper because Solidity is gnarly as hell. But anywho, all of this to say, we're going to pop over to this other tab and I can show you who has control to upgrade. Because if you review this yourself, you'll see that the issue isn't the contract. The issue is the contract can be upgraded.
Right, right. And yeah, so I'm pleased to learn that Etherscan does let you, because for the longest time I thought that if it's proxy, for some reason Etherscan just didn't build in the capability of seeing.
I mean, they should have this on the code page. You would think.
Which exactly. It's like that. I knew I was stupid because that's the most glaring oversight possible.
No. I mean, it's insane that they don't make it easy.
That being said, I didn't take that long ever looking, because it's like, oh well, why do I care what it's pointing to if it's upgradable? Yeah. You can always just rug me.
Of course. So what you want to check out here, I'll share here again. Again, and this is for folks who advanced DeFi diligence. Here you go. So what you want to do is you want to hit read as proxy, and you want to look through and you see, since we use pretty standard contracts for how this proxy works, you can say, okay, there's an owner here. Who is this? And then you click through. And there's a few things to know when you do this. So one, okay, it's a contract. So the most dangerous thing that could happen when you click through to an owner for an upgradable proxy. So the best thing that would happen is you would see a time lock. This is not a time lock. So the best thing would be a time lock, or maybe Governor Bravo or something else. So that would be ideal. The worst thing would be an EOA. So literally someone's MetaMask is the upgrade, right? So you can see that this isn't an EOA. This is a contract. So if we want to dig a little bit deeper, okay, you can see it's a Gnosis safe, which is also a proxy, but at least we know it's a Gnosis safe. So let's look at the proxy. And the thing that you want to look at the most, let me see, is get owners. So when you hit get owners, this begins to give you an idea of what this looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is a something of 9 multisig. So then the other thing you want to look at is you go to get threshold 5. So this is a 5 and 9 multisig. Currently, this is Thesis and Thesis related projects. So this is still, you don't know who these people are. So there's still that risk. And then what we'll do before the chain launches is we'll do two things. We'll introduce a time lock which we're about done with active dev on this part, so we'll be doing that shortly. And then the other thing is we'll change the signers so everyone is doxed, because I think like right now, all of these signers aren't. It could be me. They could be, they could be, there's Matt 1 and Matt 2 and Matt 3 and Matt 4, and I just kept hitting add address somewhere. So anyway, I fully recommend that you guys look into all of these signers, and hopefully this was helpful for anyone who's considering aping into a new protocol. Is do a little bit of diligence and look at the contracts.
Yeah, and I'm giving you a bit of a hard time here when the
reality it's worth it. It's good.
Well, the reality is every single L2 that anyone has ever bridged funds to is essentially probably less secure than this at the moment. So it is, and it's like bizarre because like, when you crypto pilled me and everyone else got me crypto pilled on Bitcoin 10 years ago, like there was so much thought of decentralization, and I think it's just like a consequence of needing to reach a mass market where like normies like care the opposite about decentralization, right? Like there was like a class I was teaching on crypto in the past couple of years.
Sure.
Really, one of the smart people, and it was like, I actually would prefer if I just give my funds to my guy in Switzerland. He I know who I can call. I know who I can talk to if I have a problem. If I forget my password, which I will, I know that they can reset it for me. They didn't like the idea of keeping their private keys and keeping their custody and all that, which is like, it's weird, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I am still the same maxi I've always been. And the lessons that I've learned have been a little different. So like, it's really easy to kind of get depressed by self-custody and by these root issues. And they're real, right? Like when people say be your own bank, like that's kind of terrifying. And you don't get to be a victim when you're your own bank. So when someone gets hacked, obviously, like I feel bad, and I think that was there was fraud, and that's like a form of violence, and that's against my philosophy. But self custody means taking the risks yourself. So, but what I've learned, I'm still like, let's do self custody. But what I've learned is that we have to make this stuff two things. We have to make this stuff way easier than we made it. So it would be, if you could wave a magic wand, not that hard to get everyone using a 2 of 3. Just everyone, for everything. And we make it difficult. MetaMask doesn't make that easy. And Gnosis Safe, for example, for EVMs is cool, but it's still a lot of extra work. And, we need account abstraction. No, reality doesn't make it easy.
People fade, right? Like I'm on some 3 of 5 multisigs from years ago where 3 people left crypto.
Totally, that's true. Yeah, that's fair. But for that 2 or 3, you could imagine you could just have multiple devices, and it's a hassle. But a lot of us have a phone and a laptop, so you've got 2 of the 3 already. And so there's a bunch of tooling that needs to happen on the self custody side. But then the other thing that I've kind of picked up is on the engineering side. So the first version of TBTC that we launched was the exact opposite of the contracts I just showed you. And what I mean is every single thing was immutable about TBTC v1. And I could count on my fingers the parameters that we could change. So that's the opposite of an upgradable contract. We could change the min deposit. We could change the deposit sizes. And then there was also, an emergency pause. So instead of an upgrade, we said, let's have an emergency pause. And then the emergency pause that power will go away after a year. And that was it. And what I learned doing that is, one, obviously it's hard, but it's not hard for the reasons you think. It's not because writing immutable code is difficult. The problem is you have to have product market fit if you're going to write immutable code. And if you look at something like Ethereum hasn't been immutable for a long time. And this isn't me being a Bitcoin person wringing my hands about the DAO hack. What I mean is we're still finding product market fit, and it's required changing Ethereum. Then you look at something like Bitcoin. Bitcoin hasn't really changed, but what we've told each other Bitcoin is for has changed. And you have to do one or the other, right? With Bitcoin, okay, now it's savings technology. Before it was for payments, but now it's not for payments. And we're all going to forget that we ever said that. And now it's for saving. For Ethereum, well, okay, we tried changing the narrative. It was the world computer, and then code is law. Well, code's not really law. And, we've gone through all these kind of like narratives over the years. But what's strong about the Ethereum approach, and really the Solana approach, is that the chain can move to where the users are, where the users want to go. And so what I've learned as an engineer and as a business person is we've written a lot of immutable code. For TBTC v2, though, we took a very different approach. So what we didn't do is we didn't do this whole progressive decentralization BS. What we did instead was we said, let's be decentralized from day one, but we're only going to ship half of the bridge. We're only going to ship deposits. And then it took us another 6 months to ship withdrawals. And so I think, you have to make a trade-off somewhere. Either you have to launch something that is perfect and that has product market fit on day one, which is incredibly, incredibly difficult to do. Or you have to make trade-offs either on decentralization or on functionality. So for TBTC, we went with perfectly immutable in V1. It didn't work. It was too expensive. Basically, it was too gas intensive to use. In V2, we had to go a lot more softly. We restricted functionality. We slowly upgraded it in. And then for Mezzo, what we've done is, well, right now, there's a 5 of 9 that's upgrading this contract. Then we'll introduce time locks, and we'll launch an entire chain with validators. And I'm not trying to throw stones about ETH2s, but the funny thing is, once that chain is launched with validators, it will be more decentralized than just about every ETH2 that I can come up with today. So anyway, it's complicated, but I think if you are, I hate to say this, but I think if you are looking at a new project, Garrett, your approach of do I know the people and do I trust them, unfortunately, is still pretty good until something has survived the test of time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like how I've learned to evaluate projects in this space is like still a moving target, right? Like no one can do it perfectly. And yeah. And one of the questions I had about Mezzo is I believe I saw, and I'm trying to find it and now I can't, that there's going to be at least some like EVM compatibility with Mezzo. Is that
There is
part of the intention?
Yeah, so we have in a lot of ways shared as little as possible about what we're doing.
I noticed, yeah.
Mezzo, right? Which is weird, right?
If I didn't know you, like I wouldn't have tossed the Bitcoin into it, right? Like, but
That's
I'm like,
right.
okay, like everything about this is like red flags, but whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, what do we have? I think that, I'll actually break down how the whole chain works in just a second. What we've done is
no GitHub. That part was the
yeah, right. But the cool thing is, you can see that the org has about 10 years of open source crypto under its belt. So like that's the trade-off. We haven't made it easy to find, and we're working on making that a lot more straightforward. But yeah, let me tell you how this thing works. So first, sorry guys, I didn't start with a white paper. It's not 2018. I know that that's very frustrating for some people. I get it. But going further,
gone out of fashion. This is like the 5th project I looked at the past week that like are dismissive white papers. So for Zoomers out there, a white paper is what projects used to launch as. They just have a PDF and that was it.
I guess I can write LaTeX, and if you want to look at my GitHub, you can see that I've done that before. But like the number of white papers I've read that just are vapid and go on to get in, $500 million is kind of upsetting. And so, on the one hand, we haven't given anyone a lot on Mezzo. On the other hand, I don't know, we've got 10 years.
Who cares? You got under 50. Yeah. You already raised under 50 mil, so you're doing something right.
Well, yeah, it's going well. It's going well. So all that to say, though, back to how the chain actually works. So we've been super quiet about it. We're going to testnet this quarter, which means that we'll be opening everything up. But here's the idea with the chain. So Bitcoin is not, and I'm saying this with that asterisk after that little caveat. Bitcoin is not quite.
That's what the asterisk is for.
There it is. Bitcoin is in nuance. Bitcoin is not quite ready for a true L2 beyond Lightning. So Lightning, I think we could all say this is really an L2 on Bitcoin. There are a ton of drawbacks, though, and I would say the biggest drawback with Lightning. So let's skip channel management and let's skip over all that stuff. Is just that if you're new to Bitcoin, it's quite difficult to use Lightning because you already need a channel open. And so we need a way where someone can keep custody of their own assets, but they're new. And so we've actually over the years had all these people using things like Strike and River, who have been buying small amounts of Bitcoin, and they've been taking them self-custodial. And the thing about how Bitcoin works is that's all becoming dust. So like they have all these UTXOs when Bitcoin was cheaper to use, and now with a pretty healthy gas market, a fee market, we call it in Bitcoin, we don't use the word gas, it's suddenly quite expensive for these people to move the money. So you need something. You need something that's either UTXO or account-based that doesn't work quite like Lightning for people to receive at. And I'm sure Lightning and the teams working on it are trying to solve this, and I'm sure they'll get there eventually. But until then, that's one, is we need a place where you can scale self-custody. And the other thing that we need is we need a place where people can take out loans and earn returns and earn yield. And that's my entire thing. That's what I keep ramming into is if I've held this for this long, I at least want to borrow against it. I don't want to sell, but I want to borrow against it. And so TBTC has allowed us to do this like lightly on Ethereum. WBTC, if you're comfortable with the single custodian and with KYC, it allows you to do that too. Obviously, it's way more liquid, but it's just different trust assumptions. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, okay, well, let's launch something where you can show up with just Bitcoin. You don't have to buy anything for gas. You don't have to do any KYC. It's permissionless for you to join this network. We want it to work a lot like Ethereum, at least from my user perspective. And we still want to have tokens, and we want to have DeFi, and we want to have yield and borrowing. We want to have all these primitives. And so when I looked at the landscape, there were kind of two choices, maybe three. One was the one that I completely threw out was to rebuild Ethereum from scratch with Bitcoin. There are projects that are doing this. One that I'm the most excited about because it has a lot of technically things in common with TBTC is probably Spider Chain. So they're like, let's have 100,000 nodes running, basically proof of stake with Bitcoin. Another approach, and this is one followed by Bob, which stands for Build on Bitcoin. So let's go bob.xyz. I need to make sure I use our URLs as frequently as I use, all of our friends' compliments. But what they've done is they said, okay, we're actually going to launch an OP stack chain on Ethereum, and we're going to make it about Bitcoin. So that's interesting. That bothers me because if I'm trying to convince a bunch of people who only have Bitcoin to come over, they really shouldn't have to use ETH as gas. And so upside, that's live. You can use Bob today. But downside is like, okay, well, if I want to move my Bitcoin over, I still have to buy ETH, and So I know they're trying to solve these things. They use TBTC, which I'm quite happy about. But then the last approach that I thought is like, okay, well, what if we launch a sidechain with a new set of validators? And so what we've done is we've done that on top of Cosmos SDK. And what we'll do is, we're going to launch. It'll start with a proof of authority chain, and then it'll move to a consensus mechanism we call proof of HODL. And this is where we owe Curve a huge intellectual debt, is just this idea that like, okay, we want people to kind of race to lock up an asset, but people have been doing this for Bitcoin for years. People talk about low time preference. There's an entire culture of like, I'll hold my Bitcoin forever. Well, what if you could do that and you could power the Bitcoin economy? And so that's how this consensus model works. So it's built on Tendermint. It's built on Cosmos SDK. You bridge Bitcoin with TBTC. So initially, there's actually a connection to Ethereum on this chain. And you choose how long you want to lock your BTC. And the longer you lock it, the more validation power you have. So that's the core idea. The second idea is there's another token. There's the Meso token. So the problem with just having Bitcoin locked and doing Bitcoin proof of stake is it's an exogenous asset. So that just means like you really shouldn't rely on it for your whole chain's security. That's quite dangerous because it's not a fully trust minimized bridge, right? It's still ultimately, if there's enough Bitcoin, you're increasing the incentive to be dishonest. So what the system does is there's two tokens. There's the Meso token and there's the BTC token. You can time lock both of them. Instead of voter escrowed Curve, we have validator escrowed Meso and BTC. And then those two groups run the chain. So that's the dual the dual token staking model. That's what we're calling proof of HODL. So that's the core idea. The idea after that, and this is where we get really Bitcoin heavy, is people are trying to decide how should Bitcoin L2s be built right now. And they have a few choices. So there's one thing I will recommend that you read up on. I will not explain all of how it works. There's one idea called BitVM. And if you could kind of imagine Arbitrum's sort of like fraud-proof process on Bitcoin in Bitcoin script, that's how BitVM works. It's really tough and convoluted, but it's also kind of magical that they were able to make something like that happen on Bitcoin 01. And then the other big push has been for anything that can enable what are called covenants. And so if you hear people talk about OPCAT or OPCTV, so this is a soft forked opcode on Bitcoin to enable trust minimized L2s. Neither of those things are ready for prime time today. So our thought was start a sidechain, have a lot of validators, decentralize, and then you can choose. We can choose if it's going to be an optimistic rollup or a ZK rollup. If neither of these things makes it to production on Bitcoin, that's okay too, because we still have a strong decentralized system. So that's how we've approached it. And yeah, I've been sparing with the details because, again, it's not 2018, and I'd rather you not get too hyped about a white paper. But GitHub soon.
All right. Very good answer. Very good answer. I feel like at least some piece of this must qualify as alpha, right?
Because yeah, I mean, a lot of that I haven't said publicly. Yeah, no, you go nuts.
Excellent, excellent. So that's exciting. It's just a bonus for the folks joining us on X or on YouTube. Quick shout out. We're almost closing the end, but let's go ahead and if you're on X, go ahead and retweet this. Get this out to as many people as possible. I know everyone's at ETHCC, so like, you
Living
were
that
at
Brussels
ETHCC.
life.
Yeah, you're at ETHCC, right? No,
no. So we are at I'm at this nice spot where I have a team that goes to things, and so I basically put my foot down and I said, like, I'm not traveling the rest of the year. And I go, okay, it was a little dramatic, but I might do Bitcoin Nashville. I'm slated to speak there, but I really just want to focus on getting this stuff out. And ETHCC is cool. I hear Brussels is hopping. I don't know. People seem a little tired of crypto conferences, but yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is secure running software. So that's what I've been focused on.
So I know that you're running a long time, so I'll keep questions concise. Are like Bitcoiners of a point where they're willing to pay Bitcoin in the way that Ethereum users are accustomed to paying Ethereum as gas, right? Because you mentioned that HODL culture, don't sell a single Satoshi. They're only trying to like steal your sats.
Do
you think that are Bitcoiners ready? Bitcoiners more than me.
There's been a shift, but they're not ready. So like they're not fully ready the way that we splash ETH around. But I'll say that like Asia looks at Bitcoin differently, and they treat it a lot more like ETH and Sol. Versus in the West, I think that Bitcoiners are still coming around to the fact that they would ever part with the SAT. So I think that says a couple things, right? It says a lot about growth. It says that like, okay, a lot of the people who are going to make a circular economy happen in Bitcoin don't live in the U.S., don't live in North or South America, or Europe. They're in Asia. So that's one insight that we've got. And then the and the proof of that is ordinals. So last year we had a lot of people would screech at this, but it's basically a Bitcoin NFT standard go live and get quite a bit of traction on Bitcoin L1. And I can tell you that most of the interest was in Asia. So we have some evidence of that. But the other funny thing is, from the surveys we've done, almost 75% of ordinals users actually were Ethereum or Solana people who came back to Bitcoin. So that was quite striking to me when we started digging into the data. And then the other, right? And then the other insight, though, is like, well, we want all Bitcoiners. And so if not everyone's comfortable using BTC as gas, how can we make sure that they can use other things for gas too? How can they use stablecoins for gas? How can they use whatever else that they want? And so it's quite important to us that the nice thing about owning your chain's execution environment is you can make account abstraction, you can make multiple gas tokens a priority, and you don't have to wait on, did Optimism ship this yet? You don't have to wait on that. You're in control. So that's the idea. Is I honestly, I might not want to use my Bitcoin as gas, but I'm fine with using KurveUSD as gas. So
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. No, it's a really cool idea. So I'm happy I tossed in some money before into it. One other cool thing I think, and this is like for like the Zoomers will also not get the reference, but yeah, that little mustache logo. So I don't know if
yes.
you are old enough to remember that. Why not just like stick some mezzo mustaches on cars and let them drive around to get super nasty as a way of
Oh! You think that's not going to happen? No. Listen. Look, I don't know if you can see it because it's very blonde. Gotten rid of the beard. I'm starting to grow a mustache out now. I haven't dyed it that off red yet. There will be finger tattoos. Just you're going to see it. Don't worry. They'll be everywhere. We call it the mustache internally. So.
Excited for it. I just wanted to show one last throwback while we're talking about blasts from the past. So you mentioned that like people like got off the Bitcoin as payments narrative, but there was a brief time where I was trying to push it with Fold apps. So this is from 2015, where I'm like one of the few people that actually used Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee, and that Bitcoin would now, full disclaimer, be worth like maybe $1,000 today. But yeah, if you ever had that moment,
you weren't one of the few. You weren't one of the few. It was 40,000 MAU for a while there. I mean, actually, now it's a lot higher, but people don't spend Bitcoin with it. But you were in the company of Tim Draper. You're in the company of Abby, the CEO of Fidelity. Also, actually, I think at the same Starbucks.
I have zero regrets is the thing, because have you ever like had one of those mornings where you need a cup of coffee so badly you'd be willing to pay $1,000 for it? So I actually think I came out ahead on that transaction. So I still speak as a satisfied Fold user.
Well, thank you for that, sir.
Matt, this has been an absolute pleasure. I know this is we're a couple minutes over, but is there anything at all you want to add? Anything you want to talk about that you didn't get a chance to plug, or just any like great life advice you got for people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess great life advice. We're in this fun spot where people are like, oh, is this still a bull market, and yada yada yada. And I guess I just want to remind everyone that this stuff's going to be here in 100 years. You've got time, so don't do anything silly, and think long term, and maybe don't wreck your reputation while you're at it, because we've got a long way to go. Oh, and also, of course, check out mezzo.org if you want to be in the same company as Garrett here.
Thank you all. So it sounds to me like that is permission for you all to go out and touch grass this weekend, and that you still have time. You're early, all that. Friends, thank you all for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Squiddies, you know where to find us. You can find us on YouTube, on X, on Telegram, where we have our bot operating our 24/7 news headlines channel, and powered by Squid. We will catch you